So my name is Kim Konikow, and I'm the Executive Director of the North Dakota Council on the Arts. I recognize a lot of faces from out there. I wish I knew you all. I'm just going to do a quick introduction and then come back at the end. So we're going to hear about a very special project that's taken place. I want to thank SpringBoard for the Arts and Emily Kurash Casey from Rethos, Places Reimagined. And this project came together through the North Dakota Main Street Initiative Artists on Main Street program, which took place during the summer of 2021. And it took place in Bowman County Development, which is where Brooklyn Engelhardt is from. And this is a new program, and Commerce really hopes to expand this into the future because the success is really evident in this project, and we can see how it can be transferred to others. So this breakout session is going to provide an overview of the process that took place and the project status, because it is still in process. And then we'll discuss the overarching theme of incorporating art into infrastructure. Yes, we have to, and we have to do it at the beginning. Then I, of course, will come back and share a really short synopsis of a program called Arts Across the Prairie, Creative Placemaking for Rural North Dakota, and then some insight on tools that you all can find through commerce, through tourism, and through North Dakota Council on the Arts. So we are going to start with Emily.
All right, good afternoon, folks. Nothing like that early afternoon, late lunch slump. I'll try to get you going a little bit. So I am Emily Kurash Casey. I am the Rural Programs Manager at Rethos. I actually come to you today out of Winona, Minnesota, so the southeast corner of Minnesota. Rethos is based out of St. Paul, though, so we work with the entire state of Minnesota. So working with North Dakota is a little bit new to me. I tend to move east. I connect with Wisconsin and Iowa a heck of a lot, but I'm excited to be here today. Next slide. So Rethos does a number of things. We are the coordinating entity for the Main Street program in the state of Minnesota, working with communities all around the state of a number of sizes in partnership with Main Street America. We also have a real estate program where we work with the historic tax credit, easements, other things like that, as well as education for realtors and homeowners who own and work with and sell old buildings, both residential and commercial. Next slide. Main Street, at its core, is economic development. So that is where I am coming to you in that place today, that Main Street is going to think about how to forward what revitalization is happening with what you've already got in your district, what assets are already there. I also want to throw out all of the photos that are in my slide deck today are from communities in Minnesota who've already instituted this program. So Brooklyn will be showing you photos from Bowman, but the photos in my slide deck are from communities in Minnesota ranging from a population of 500 up to 50, 70,000 in the Mankato area. Next slide. So I'm also representing SpringBoard for the Arts today. SpringBoard is our co-collaborator in this Artists on Main Street process. Michele Anderson, my partner in crime, can't be here today. They have a different project going on. But SpringBoard for the Arts' mission is to cultivate vibrant communities by connecting artists with skills, information, and services they need to make both a living and a life. Definitely check out SpringBoard for the Arts for resources for artists, or if you are an artist yourself, they have a lot of resources available to you for planning, working with other folks in your communities, making grants, as well as community-based project resources. Next slide. So I want you to think about this definition of art. Art has a lot of definitions, as does the word placemaking, but this is the definition of art that SpringBoard for the Arts has really built their mission and methodology around, that when creating Artists on Main Street, we really latched on to this idea that art is a weaving of meaning-making activity with any or all parts of our lives. So it's not just sculptures, it's not just murals, it's not just big public events. It's any piece of meaning-making that we find both in our district and in our homes that we're working with. Next slide. Oh, I can click play. This is how prepared I am. I can advance the slides. Thank you for taking care of me back there. A few of the key values of Artists on Main Street. We really came into it with this twofold approach. First is that downtown is for everybody. It is the people who are leading Main Street efforts. It is their responsibility to make sure that this is being kept in mind and that everyone is having easier access to downtown districts. So that is folks who are aging, that is moms pushing strollers, that is people who are new to the community, new to the country, people with physical barriers, monetary barriers. All of these people should have a place in downtown. And Artists on Main Street really, really took that to heart when planning activities, events, and training. The second is that there is creative power within people. So artists are leading community economic development. At its core, Artists on Main Street is meant to spur economic activity. Placemaking is important, creating places for people is important, but it's also geared towards advancing the vitality of our downtown districts. It's building relationships, I'll talk about that more in a bit, and creating partnerships where maybe those partnerships were very tentative or simply did not exist at all. I really want to take 1 second to talk about the project that you see on the screen. This is in Northfield, Minnesota. Northfield had a big problem with geese kind of taking over their riverfront trail area, making it very unpleasant for folks to walk and enjoy the space. And there were a couple artists who worked in tandem. One, to do this bridge weaving project that she switched out weavings on the bridge throughout the season with bright colors in the summer, more fall tones, that led people down to the river path where an artist used bells and whistles and windsocks and other found somewhat cheap objects to keep these geese away. And suddenly their riverfront became accessible for pedestrians, for picnickers, for people to gather again. And this was a problem that the city had been trying to tackle for years with lots of money. So the fact that an artist could use less than $1,000 and solve that problem was pretty exciting for Northfield. So the premise, as I mentioned, is to foster artist-led problem solving to solve very specific challenges in downtown districts. Artist-led problem solving was really this core idea for taking challenges like the goose problem in the riverfront, or activating spaces that maybe pedestrians weren't walking all the time. Challenges that are often thrown to city managers, elected officials, people who've gone to school for engineering or business or you name it. People who are usually tasked with solving problems and also being given a lot of money to solve those problems. Artists on Main Street flipped that narrative on its head by using artists and creative folks who lived and worked in those communities to address those challenges that normally got tossed to City Hall. The goals: 1, build and diversify these cross-sector networks between cities, private companies, as well as the public in general. Increasing community and economic vitality. Ultimately, though, we wanted to change the narrative. We wanted people to think about how they interacted with their downtown districts differently. They also wanted to activate artists as problem solvers by tapping into this creative energy that already exists in every single community. There is a wealth of energy and ideas and excitement that probably hasn't been tapped into yet. And to also support the arts as entrepreneurship. Artists are entrepreneurs that are often very underpaid. Folks like to use exposure as payment for artists. And since the arts have been such integral problem-solving vehicles in communities, artists needed to be paid for their time and expertise. So the pilot project in Minnesota ran from 2018 to 2022. We were in 11 different communities around the state, varying in size, in diversity, in just business base. It was a plethora of communities. And we worked with our first community in North Dakota this year, in Bowman. Right now, our tally is at more than 200 artists. And we have one more wrap-up year next summer that will add to that list of artists that have created activity in downtown districts. Our first 4 years of the project in Minnesota were funded by the Bush Foundation, so I want to give them a shout out for their incredible work for helping us make this happen in Minnesota. And our ultimate goal with the pilot project was to create a toolkit so we could replicate this model in other places like North Dakota. As part of the National Main Street Network, I can also say we've shared this with Virginia, with Louisiana, with a lot of communities recognizing that there's untapped potential in their people, in their community already. This is the process that we have honed and defined when we are working with our communities. So first, the community has to identify the challenge. And that challenge might be changing the narrative, changing the perception of what downtown is, some of that intangible feelings about what downtown is in your community. Working on diversity and inclusion efforts. Maybe there's a lot of folks moving to your community for a specific job, or there has been a community who's moved in as refugees to your community. Generating foot traffic in the downtown district, activating alleyways. I'll touch on that specific topic in a minute. And just connecting neighborhoods, either be that business districts where there are a lot of workers or places where people are living. So once that challenge has been defined, we come in, Rethos and SpringBoard for the Arts, host this creative placemaking training. We prefer to be in person. We did do it virtually in tandem with some on-the-ground work with Brooklyn and the team in Bowman. But hosting this creative placemaking training, it's several hours. It's a mix of listening and learning with going out and doing activity in your specific district. And after that training, local creatives in your community submit their application for their idea for solving this challenge. The approved projects are instituted over the designated course of time. Sometimes that's a few months, sometimes it's a couple years. And then you review and repeat. It's meant to be ongoing. We have found in every community that we've worked with that these projects just don't stop. Even when funding is gone, they find more ways to keep this momentum happening in their communities. Within the partnership building world, which we learned pretty quickly was a key focus for Artists on Main Street. It couldn't be something that just happened in a bubble on its own. So the Main Street District, or person coordinating this effort in the Main Street area, needed to partner with artists and creatives in the community. Sometimes that was through an arts council, sometimes it was through just different individual artists who are working as entrepreneurs already. But then they also needed to tap in with business and property owners in the district as the places where some of these projects were going to happen. That seems to be the trickiest part, is connecting with some of those building owners and business owners to get the buy-in for collaboration. And then finally, collaboration with the city. It can be a little scary as an elected official, as a city manager, as a mayor, to have people come at you and say, hey, we want to do some stuff we've never done before. Will you let us do it? And there's questions about insurance. There's questions about who's in charge of lasting upkeep. And it's a lot of trusting and figuring out some new processes that haven't existed before in your town. But it opens up the channels of communication for future growth to happen a lot easier. Let's try it again. Some of the successes that we've seen since the 2018 inception of this program, there is increased economic base and stability in the towns where Artists on Main Street has been instituted. Sometimes it's hard, you don't always see that growth immediately, but if you look back on this 4 and 5 year length of time since Artists on Main Street started, there are new businesses, there is increased spending in terms of public infrastructure, be it sidewalks, benches, fountains, things for people to engage with in the district. We saw faster resilience specifically during the pandemic, but we also had a couple districts that were hit with severe weather, a tornado or fire. One instance, a car ran into a building right on the corner of a downtown district, and they were able to rally faster. They had learned how to act swiftly in a lots of little mentality. There's a bigger community-wide learning curve, and it's a lot more inclusive. And not just inclusive of diversity of race, but age diversity, working with kids all the way down to preschool and elementary school, to folks in senior housing developments, that everybody is being included rather than just folks who are in the workforce. There's a willingness to attempt new programming, not just murals and sculptures and activities, but trying something like a parklet, a tiny little pop-up park that's as big as a parking space in a downtown. Using this lots of little approach, we call it a low-cost, low-fail approach, because if you spend $800 to $1,000 on a project and it turns out to not work, it's okay. $1,000 in the grand scheme of things isn't a big loss. That way you've learned, instead of making that $100,000 investment in your downtown, that, oh, maybe this isn't quite for us. And lastly, there's a big shift in city acceptance of ordinances and methods of how they're doing their work. I'll give you a few examples of that in just a second. So I want to talk just about 3 case studies of some multi-year successes in 3 of the communities that we worked with in Minnesota. So the first is Willmar, Minnesota. They are a town of about 20,000 in west central Minnesota. They have an incredibly diverse community due to having factories that employ folks who have moved to Willmar from a number of South American and Central American communities, as well as Somalia, other East African countries. So they had this challenge of places for people to be in downtown that didn't feel like loitering. So they activated some empty lots. They didn't really have a lot of park places or benches or people to just gather for the sake of gathering. Their first year in 2019, an artist created this bubble station that had bubbles and things for kids to play with, but also just benches for adults to sit and eat and gather and talk at. Because that had happened and those permits had been issued in 2019, when the pandemic hit in 2020, restaurants couldn't do a lot of serving in some of these places that didn't have good space for social distancing. They didn't have outdoor parks in the downtown district for folks to grab carry-out and sit outside. So the city moved picnic tables and benches from parks in the outskirts of town into the sidewalks, closed down parking spaces, and took up some sidewalk space for these tables from outer parts of the city. People were there all the time. And the city of Willmar saw this as a reason to invest even further. And this summer, they are building permanent parklet structures that fit in the space of one parking unit that will go up in May and down at the end of October or November, depending on what the winter is like, that folks from banks, from insurance offices, from any of the employers in downtown, as well as just the general community, can bring their food, bring their kids, hang out, gather, eat. Winona, which is actually my community, I have to be a little proud of that. Winona has a lot of festivals. It has a couple of universities in the community, but nobody went downtown. They held special events in parks and on campuses, and downtown foot traffic was limited at best. So in Winona, the goal was to activate downtown as a gathering space for people to host events and special things. You can see in the first couple years there were street dances, there were drum circles, and later on, after those first couple years, during the pandemic, in April, so pretty fast after closures happened in 2020, every single Friday, the entire street shut down, so all of the pubs and bars and restaurants and shops could move stuff out into the sidewalk, folks could gather and social distance in the downtown, and the city council, without question, approved shutting down streets really fast into the pandemic. That has continued into every Friday this summer. So every Friday night, the street shuts down, restaurants move outside, there are special cabaret events and dances, and you name it, downtown is suddenly an event venue, which has been tremendous for the buildings. The building owners getting folks to move in, as well as the business owners to make money. Mankato, their Old Town district, which is their historic downtown, is situated on a state highway that moves through it at 45 miles per hour, which is not great for pedestrian traffic. They wanted to activate their alleyways and a couple gaps where buildings had been torn down as places for people to gather and feel safe and invited. You can see some of the murals that have happened that were community painted, working with artists who were showing the community how they did their process, and now they're a hot spot for senior pictures, wedding pictures, just a great place to go look. People show everyone what they painted. There's a chalk library that's like a little free library, but with chalk. This space right here was just kind of a gap. There had been a skinny building that had been turned down that now has temporary seating that both residents and workers can sit and enjoy being outside in a shaded place that's not right on the busy street. And there's also a business that's right in front of this skinny opening where they put out, like, remember Skip-Its from the 90s and chalk and bubbles so that people can just like stop and chat and gather and drink their coffee and talk to each other. So those are some examples and the process of how Artists on Main Street has worked when we piloted it in Minnesota. And I'm going to pass it off to Brooklyn to talk specifically about what's happening in Bowman.
Awesome. Well, Bowman started this journey in the summer. I don't even remember when, and I remember getting the email and saying, like, yeah, that fits what we're doing right now. This comes through on ways we're existingly putting into practice with murals and downtown beautification and all the things that we know is important. And this program fits exactly in with that. So we were really excited about this program coming through and how we could utilize more art and less of our office trying to go out and do these artistic things and more of bringing artists to do the artistic things themselves. So one of the main things we highlighted when we submitted to do this was that people are stuck in what our Main Street was. They no longer see the possibilities of what it can be. They see, well, we don't have what was there 30 years ago, so we must be dying. So we must not be as good as what we once were. And one of the programs we did in 2020 was a vacant building tour of all of our downtown businesses and a few that weren't there. And through that process, we saw people could think that there was more to these buildings and that there was more to our downtown that we hadn't realized yet. And one of the things we did was make a rendering of this was what that building was. This is what you can make it. And we did several of those. And we wanted to make sure that people still realized that those possibilities still existed to be something that they didn't think of. Through that program, once we started getting people to realize that there's possibilities, we had 3 permanent fills on our Main Street and 2 temporary fills on our Main Street. So we saw that by bringing life into an underutilized space, you see change. All right, so the program started, oh boy. And we had 22 people from Bowman County come to our workshop and listen to Michele and Emily see all the things that they had done, a lot of what you just learned and saw there. And then they had the chance to sit down and talk about it and be together in a room and say, these are what we would love to see. And we saw all different backgrounds. So we had professional artists, we had people that were bakers, woodworkers, we had a hairstylist there. We had all these different people from all these different backgrounds that you never would have put in the same room together. They weren't the people that you would normally go and, hey, we got one pocket of people and we're good. They were all of our backgrounds. So from there then, they went and did an observation tour. And that was one of the cool parts of the tour is we had somebody say, one of our Main Street business owners, that he didn't remember the last time he had actually walked our downtown district. He didn't remember the last time he just took the time to look what was in our community and see the beauty in it. So what they did on that observation tour is the first about 10 minutes, everyone walked down their side of the street in complete silence, and these were the instructions given to us. Observe and notice your surroundings, surfaces, negative and positive spaces, lines, patterns, detritus. Follow your curiosity, search for everyday beauty and the overlooked. Go forth with a sense of affection for the place. So that first 10 minutes, it was the strangest thing for some of those people just to walk their main street and just see what was there. Not talk about it right away, just what was beautiful. What is the things they haven't noticed in however long. When we all got to the end of our section, then we took 15 minutes to walk back and talk in our groups. And this is what their prompt was then. Share things you noticed during your observation and why they stood out to you. Beware the urge to be critical and prescribe fixes. Stay in the present and focus on the everyday beauty you observed. When we got back into our room after doing the observation tour, you could just see the excitement that was in everyone. They had looked at Main Street in a different way for the first time in maybe ever. And then from there, we had them take their ideas, write them on paper, and they spent 5 to 10 minutes just writing ideas, things they wanted to see in their Main Street, things they wanted to be different about Bowman and that people would come out and experience and walk downtown. Some of those ideas were music playing on the street, fun bike racks, something at the end of our Main Street, murals, window displays in empty buildings, wind sculptures, a man-made art forest, laughter after 5:30, trees in a sitting area. So they took all those ideas, they put them all up there, then they went and grouped things, what goes together, and they started formulating their ideas. They started seeing people who maybe had similar ideas with them and how they could play on that person's idea to make a project happen. After this workshop, they had about a month to put together their ideas, and then they turned them into us. And from there, we had 6 projects that we will be funding, most of which will be completed before the end of the year. Our first one was a program called An Artist in Everyone by our Kathy Hedge. She wanted to bring art classes into a vacant building and activate a vacant building. So she will be teaching 2 painting classes, one in November, one in December, both centered around a holiday theme. These people will do a step-by-step, kind of like your sip and paint classes, in the vacant building itself, and then they'll put up all the art displayed in the window, so when people walk by, they see all the art in that building. So she focuses on bringing beauty back to a vacant storefront by making art accessible to all. One of our next ones was Art Drop by Sarah Snavely. And Sarah is a ceramicist, and she is gonna make 25 of these handmade buffaloes. And on a day, she's gonna drop them all over, take pictures, and post those pictures on social media as clues to go and have a scavenger hunt in our downtown district. And she got this idea, she kind of wanted to play off someone else who did an art drop, and she wanted to replicate what we did in our observation tour of getting people to go out, walk their Main Street, and see it in a different way that they hadn't seen it before, because then they could really appreciate the beauty. So Sarah's gonna focus on experiencing Main Street in a unique and positive way while observing the heart of our community in a new way. Our next project, we got a little bit of an extension on because it is a Blue Skies and Badlands mural by Marie. And Marie wants to paint this whole side of our library into a Badlands depiction of our western North Dakota landscape. And so with our program, they were supposed to be done October through December-ish, and she thought she could do it. And she has a timeline to get it done, but we all know North Dakota can be a little unpredictable. So we'll let her finish up in the spring, but first she'll start out with a 1x3 foot painting of her mural, and she'll display that in the library until she can go out and actually paint that mural. But she wanted to make a connection between our downtown and our heart and the new presidential library that's going to be coming up in Medora. Our next project was a handy bike rack by Nancy. And Nancy noticed that our bike traffic has increased downtown, and that's a great thing. We want to be able to be a more walkable community, a rideable community, but we have no bike racks anywhere downtown. So she wanted to solve this issue by making a sculpture piece that also functioned as a bike rack. And so she will place 3 of these steel hands, and that the bike slips in to the bottom to hold it up, and there'll be a triangle of them so the bikes sit in a circle. And she found a parking lot at the edge of Main Street, and that's where she'll be doing her project. But she wanted to make functionality out of art and address that we want increased foot traffic and biking traffic. Our next one was Our Town by Roxanne. She wanted to focus on the power of unity and the thankfulness for our community. So she will coordinate 40 students to each paint a single tile of this mural. And this will be at the end of our Main Street, and they won't know what they're painting until it all goes together. And her purpose is to show people that we all fit together, we all do stuff together, and there's beautiful unity in that, and we should be very thankful for that. So she plans on doing that up around Thanksgiving time. Our next one was a Prairie Walk on Main Street that was led by our museum administrator, and they used to have a Prairie Walk outside of the museum. And she wanted to find a way to bring that back, because people love the native prairie grasses and they love seeing what our landscape was and a way to experience those. So we have a Main Street garden, and she said that'd be a perfect place. There's already plants there, there's already foot traffic there. I will make a planters. I will fill them with native grasses, native flowers. I will put their names on them, and I'll direct them to the museum. And the museum will direct them there. So she wanted to increase that foot traffic, get people from Main Street to the museum and museum to Main Street. And so that one, she'll get all of her boxes made this year, and then in the spring, she'll plant all the native grasses. So those were our 6 projects, and we had this as our selection committee. We had our economic development director, 2 business representatives, a city commissioner, and an artist. And they attended that creative placemaking workshop with the artists, so they understood the program. They were there for the brainstorming. They could get behind the projects and the people that were doing these projects. And then they also sat in one meeting and discussed all these projects, gave feedback to them on what they think could make better, and helped them with that. So our goal really for this program is that we want our community to realize that there are no rural limitations, that they can make their Main Street beautiful by what they want to do. We had even some of our negative voices attend and participate in our Artists on Main Street program, and if we get them behind beautification and building their own community, we will see that we are no longer the only ones pushing for growth, beauty, and vibrancy. So if you want to see how their projects end up, you can follow along and see their process. We are so excited for 4 out of the 6 to be completed before the end of the year. So that was Artists on Main in Bowman.
I'm inspired, for sure. So I'm going to take you through very quickly Arts Across the Prairie placemaking in rural North Dakota. So what we're doing is we're taking it out of the communities and the downtown main streets, and we're really looking for work that is happening in rural areas around the state. So first of all, Arts Across the Prairie is the first of its kind, the first statewide public art program from North Dakota Council on the Arts. There will be 8 large-scale installation works, one for each geographic region of the state, and it's reflecting the cultural heritage, the unique history, the landscape of the people that lived in those regions, live there now, and what's coming in the future. One of the things I just wanted to pick up on that both Brooklyn and Emily talked about is start with what you have and look at it with new eyes. And that's something that I think this program is going to do. So we're going to celebrate, again, the cultural heritage of these rural areas. And the only thing that North Dakota Council on the Arts is saying to each of the regions is, wherever you put this installation, it needs to be in a rural area. So let me back up one step. Rural meaning no buildings, no people. So it's a little bit opposite of a Main Street project, but we're looking at the state as our Main Street. And I'm not going to read these slides to you. You can have a chance to pick up my card or go to this on the website. But the idea is that we would foster creative relationships. And again, I think relationships is absolutely key. And artists are key to problem solving. Artists think in a different way than we do. I consider myself creative and artistic, but I'm not an artist. But artists get things done, and they get things done with very little resources all the time. We want to recognize that, we want to bring them into the process, and again, we want to do it early. We feel that for a state arts council, it's an important role for us to take on to actually really develop relationships with other state agencies and help with economic development in a bigger way, possibly through tourism. All of this is community driven. The program really builds on private and public partnerships and provides a national model. So there's going to be about 5 years of building in rural areas, and it will probably be a cost of over $5 million by the time we're through. Arts across the prairie, here are the goals. Cross-county networking and regional collaboration, which we feel is really important for North Dakota. Promoting tourism in and out of state, also with international travelers. Stimulating economic activity and development in rural areas. Building stronger arts communities. Investing in North Dakota artists, which is always a battle. And celebrating and leveraging creative and existing assets that are here. We feel like we can help build North Dakota. There are 8 regions. The area that we're really concentrating on right now is Northwest North Dakota, Region 1, 3 counties. There's a stakeholder group that has been in existence for over 18 months. They've been meeting by Zoom, a side effect of COVID, but it actually has worked in our favor. All participants in the stakeholders group are guided through the process. They are learning about budgeting. They're learning about putting together a request for proposals. They're getting technical assistance. We've also started working in Region 4, northeast corner of the state. Region 2, we've just begun. And also a little bit of work in Region 3. And I started with Region 1 only because they had only 3 counties. Some of the other regions that have many counties are a little harder to pull people together. This is one of my favorite images of what can be done in a rural place in terms of creating artistic installations. We've got an amazing partnership with North Dakota DOT, and they are going to be paying for 100% of road parking lot build-out signage if we build our projects off a state road. We're working with tourism, who is putting not money, cash money in, but also really helping with marketing and in-kind work. And we're also going to be training North Dakota artists, because there are not a lot of people here who have experience in these large outdoor installation pieces. And now I'm just at the end, and I just want to say thank you to Brooklyn and Emily, but you've got some ideas of placemaking both in smaller cities, in larger cities, in downtowns, as well as in rural areas. And I hope that you will just consider that creativity is shared by everyone. We can all think differently. We are all artists in our own way in terms of what we do. So whether we come together with economic development, city planners, city governments, whether we're working with counties and regions, what we're trying to do is to build a stronger North Dakota with arts at its core. So thank you all, and we're happy to take any questions. We kind of raced through things, but if you have questions, please, we're welcome. We'd love to hear them for any one of us. You are all, yes?
The artist that you were just talking about?
Yes.
Is it similar to the kinds of things that are on like the Enchanted House?
Yeah, I would say probably yes. I mean, Gary Greff did an amazing job, and he said, I want to highlight my community, and he started up at the highway, and he built these installations, and they're all the way down to South Dakota, and they are rudimentary and made of metal, but they are crafted, and they, with an influx of money, they are now sound. We're raising the money ahead of time. We received $1 million appropriation from the legislature last spring, specifically for the maintenance of the 8 pieces, so that they will be taken care of. And they, again, will be rural pieces. We don't know what they'll look like. We don't know what they'll be made of. And that's a tough one for people to get by. It's like, well, we want it here. We want it here. And we have to get the counties to talk to each other and say what best represents the cultural heritage of the region. It's not about where it is. It's about what it represents about the people of North Dakota. Sure. Any other questions for all 3 of us? Yes. And I'm supposed to repeat the question. I'm sorry. The question was about training North Dakota artists. How often will they be and who will participate? I'll give you my business card because it's a little bit down the road. We have to first put the RFP out for the artist to do the first piece in Northwest North Dakota Region 1. But every artist we bring in will get trained, will train other North Dakota artists, and eventually we really hope North Dakota artists will be making these pieces because they'll have the training. Mindy.
Okay, I have 2 questions. One is for Emily with SpringBoard. First of all, how do I get to be part of that program? And where do you get your funding?
Okay.
Sure. Here,
How do
I'll
you-
in front of the microphone.
How do you get the funding and how do you get to be part of the program?
Yeah, so funding can come from anywhere. We've had some communities that have written their own grants, and it ranges from a project of, there's $5,000 for 5 different projects, to there's $15,000 over the course of a few years for projects. It varies. I know we would love to continue this partnership next year, so watch Commerce's page for what that could look like in the future of. We did partner with Commerce for this to happen, but if this is something you're really interested in bringing to your own town, like right now, grab my card, we can talk. Yeah.
My follow-up question is for Bowman. I didn't get your first name.
Brooklyn.
How did you find all of the artists?
How did you find all of the artists who participated in Bowman? And I just want to add on to what Emily said. Commerce offered this first grant, and it's been so successful, they will be offering it again.
Yeah, so when we took the program, they sent over past marketing that other communities had done. And so we took that and we thought, what will work for ours? So we actually put little stickers together and gave them to our restaurants and coffee shops. So everywhere people looked, there was a sticker. Of social media, of course, press release, and then we actually made a list of artists that we knew in our community, and we reached out to each of those artists. They were all local. So somebody outside could have come and asked, but most of the time you see that the artists that want to invest in your community are the ones that are living in your community. So.
There are artists everywhere. Am I right? There are artists everywhere. And honestly, you just have to talk to them, and we can do that. So congratulations to Bowman. Please follow up with Emily, with Brooklyn, with myself, Kim at the Arts Council. We would love to, for those of you that are interested, we will make sure that the list of, can I go back? Will this go back? Not that far. Okay, there are resources listed right there on the screen. North Dakota Council on the Arts has a specific grant program called Special Projects, which will give you funds up to $1,250, which you have to match but half of that can be in kind. There's also grants at the commerce page that's listed there. There are grants at the tourism page. So there are resources, and they're not necessarily a lot, but they start the seed of something happening, and that's about all it takes, is some kind of excitement, some kind of discussion about what can we do to work together to bring arts into our community, to raise main streets and rural areas around our state. Thanks, guys.